Hello, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of the Neuroplasticity Alliance's Lunch and Learn Boot Camp in celebration of Brain Awareness Week. My name is Sherry Odom. I am the founder and the executive director for the Neuroplasticity Alliance. And I am eager to get started with our conversation today. I know we had a great discussion with Dr. Elena Fong yesterday from Cognitive FX, and I've heard from quite a few people who really enjoyed that presentation, and we'll be sending that recording out along with the attachments that we mentioned in that discussion a little bit later today. So I wanted to give everybody just a few more minutes to get in, and we're getting quite a few people joining. I hope you've got your lunch ready, and I don't know what's on deck for lunch today, but I'm looking for a little bit of pasta here in a little bit after this. So I am giving just a few more minutes, so bear with me for just a few seconds. For those of you who don't know NPA, the Neuroplasticity Alliance was founded by myself back about a little bit over a year or so ago. And I am the founder and the executive director for that, creating this nonprofit to help spread the word around neuroplasticity-based therapies. The impetus for this was really some challenges, central nervous system related challenges in my family, my mother, my daughter, and also a couple of nieces and nephews who were dealing with depression, multiple sclerosis, and learning difficulties. And after several years of really, not thriving, I ran across Norman Doidge's book about neuroplasticity, and he mentioned several of the therapies in there, tried those, really changed the trajectory for those individuals in their life and my family as a whole. So I got super excited, became very motivated, and wanted to try and share all of the knowledge I had gained through that. And because a lot of these therapies are more cutting edge and on the leading edge, you have a hard time finding out about them, getting access to them. And unfortunately, insurance is just not covering all of the treatment that are included in some of these therapies. So it's NPA's goal to make sure that people know about these therapies, that they're accessible, and to help develop and scale them so that individuals like yourself can learn about them and gain access to them. So today's speaker is Deana Smith from Brain Balance. Deana has she has a background in childhood development. She is a center director for several Brain Balance locations here in Georgia. And she is also a cognitive coach at those centers, working hands-on with the patients. So she knows Brain Balance intimately and really has quite a few, I think several exercises for us today. She's going to go over and share a bit about Brain Balance, which is really at its heart a hemispheric integration program. And what that means is the two hemispheres of the brain. She's going to explain that to us in more detail today. And they use both sensory, physical, and nutrition-based exercises to help children with developmental issues, overcome their learning difficulties. And just a second. I'm fighting off a little bit of a cold here. The Brain Balance program was developed by a parent who is a functional neurologist who had children with learning difficulties. He used his experience in brain injury and functional neurology to develop the Brain Balance program. And it now has over 100 centers nationally, and they've treated over 50,000 patients. So it's one of those nuggets out there that it's easy to access. There's not a lot in the neuroplasticity field that seems like it's easy to access, but this is one of them. And we're excited to have Deana on board to share this with us today. So Deana, are you here?
I'm now in as a panelist.
Yay. Sorry about that, Deana. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's great to be here, Sherry. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I am super excited to share Brain Balance with our population today and the audience, because I think it's a program that is really unique in its approach, and it has such a diverse program to be able to help children and teens and even adults. I think, there are people that have benefited from that. And the fact that you have 100 locations, I think it allows a lot of access. So not a lot of travel may be needed. And I know you have a virtual program as well, which we'll get into.
Yep.
Well, why don't we start with you giving a good overview of Brain Balance, maybe how it's unique and what a patient would go through from an assessment standpoint as they come into the program.
Sure. Do you want me to share my screen?
Sure, if you have some slides. Yeah, why don't you?
I'll have some slides. Okay. Okay.
Do you see it down at the bottom?
I do. Hold on 1 second. Okay. Sharing screen.
There we go. You see your slides now. Maybe you can expand it.
I will. Just gonna. Okay, there we go. And there we go. Okay, so again, thanks for having me. And I am the executive director of Brain Balance of Swanee, Brain Balance of Roswell. In Georgia, we have a total of 3 centers. So we have one in Peachtree City as well. And we are actually, this is a fun fact, the first actual centers. So Dr. Melillo, we've been here for 16 years, and we started here in Atlanta. And now, as you said, Sherry, we have over 100 centers around the country. And it was common to have families from all over the world come here and relocate temporarily. So we've always had a bit of a home program for special cases, but now we have a full-on virtual center as well. Yeah, so what we're about and how we're unique. So we do not require a diagnosis. Children that come here, we're a non-medical, holistic approach. So a lot of families that are coming here, they may or may not have had their kids evaluated, and that's okay, because what we're doing is we're treating symptoms, not a label. So a lot of kids that come here struggle with emotional immaturity, focus, attention. They could be deregulated. Socialization is a big one, sensory, academic struggles, anything with that beautiful part of the brain, the neuroplasticity, that we can change. And that is the beauty of the brain, is we are working the way the brain develops organically, which is from the bottom of our brain stem up through all of our senses, our environment, and movement. So we are looking at all of the underdeveloped areas in the brain. And this is how we're definitely a unique center, is that we are a hemispheric integration program. And what that means is we're looking at the hemispheres of the brain, and we're breaking it down to the left and the right hemispheres and what they're responsible for. So if we look, that left side of the brain, that is our gas pedal. That is our detailed or instant gratification seeking verbal IQ side of the brain. It's our positive emotions and it's our conscious actions, our processing, our linear logical thinking side of the brain versus our right side, which is our brake pedal. And it's our EQ. It's our emotional regulation. You want me to put some view mode? Can you not see this?
Yeah, we can see the screen, Deana. I think if you could, it's still showing the side charts. I think if we could make it just a little bit bigger.
Okay.
If you can't get it, it's fine.
Okay. Yeah, I don't see that on my end. I'm just trying to see how I can.
It would be on your slides. So see slideshow at the top, maybe at the instead of in.
Try.
On your screen, it's next to share at the top. It's okay, Deana. Why don't you just go ahead?
I do see what you're seeing. I'm just trying to figure out how to get it out of that. Let me stop the share and then reshare.
Okay. And then maybe, yeah, we've got to.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't know if that's better. Can you see it now?
Yes, much perfect. That's perfect, right?
Okay. All right. So we're just gonna leave this screen on. I'm not gonna go back. So what we were looking at is we're looking at the hemispheres of the brain. We're looking at the left and the right side of the brain. We're looking at what they're responsible for. So how we're unique, how we're different from any other program in the world really is that we focus on the weaker side of the brain. So these are signs of an imbalance on the left and the right side of the brain. So at the initial assessment, when the child comes in, we're looking at all these underdeveloped areas in certain parts of the brain that have to do with things like body awareness. How are we feeling our own body so we can sense and feel others? We can read nonverbal cues. What is my perception of things like pressure, pain, hot and cold, depth perception? Our vestibular system plays a big part of that. So we're looking at all of these underlying underdeveloped issues, but we're also looking at how is the function of each of these hemispheres of the brain. If you think of a Wi-Fi connection, the brain works like that. The left and the right hemisphere needs to have strong neuro pathways back and forth, constantly communicating. If we don't have that, we have signals being missed, and like a Wi-Fi connection, let's just say you have 1 or 2 bars instead of 5, you're going to get slower processing. And that's what we're looking for. We call it a functional disconnect. So if you look here, typically on the left side of the brain, we're looking at more academic overall weaknesses when it's a left brain weak child. So we're looking at things like dyslexia, processing disorders. And then on the right side, it's more of emotional, social, behavioral focus, anxiety, all of that typically is on the right side of the brain because that's our EQ. It's our emotional quotient of the brain. So once we figure this out and we look at, okay, at the initial assessment, do we have this hemispheric imbalance? If we do, which side of the brain are we going to focus on? Because in the program, that's what we do. We do it intense, multisensory stimulation to the weaker side of the brain.
So, Deana, then does that mean, what if you've got both sets of challenges, right? You've got issues that are on the left or the right.
That's a great question, Sherry. We would hope that you would, because both hemispheres are working. So what we look for is an overall trend. So everything that we're measuring in the initial assessment, all the data we're taking, it usually will have a significant imbalance of a trend where that one side is just taking the lead. So you can still, both sides are still working. When you get that connection and we intensely stimulate the weaker side, overall, the whole brain is going to improve. So you can absolutely have weaknesses. Let's say you're right brain weak in our program, and we're focusing on the right side of your brain. You can absolutely, have strengths on that side too. So you can be social and still be right brain weak. It's just certain areas. A very good example of a hemispheric imbalance. The DSM, I don't believe, uses Asperger's anymore. But if you think of a high functioning autistic child, typically they have a very, very high IQ. I've seen kids that are in second grade on collegiate levels of reading. I mean, I've had a child who could tell me how to make a rocket ship out of duct tape. I mean, they're off the charts, but their emotional side of the brain, the EQ side, the right side of the brain, they can't sit back and forth and have a conversation of who, what, how am I feeling, and be in touch with their own emotions. They can't read nonverbal cues. They don't get sarcasm. And that's just an example. Every single child is so unique and different. That's why we don't, really look into labels or any kind of diagnoses. I mean, it's helpful when you come in what other professionals have said, but we're just treating the symptoms, and they can be improved. And that's the beauty of this, is that we can create connectivity and we can help these kids reach their full potential, and adults. And there's no stopping. We don't know what anyone's full potential is, but by closing that hemispheric imbalance gap, your brain's going to always grow with whatever you do, but you're always going to have these lopsided skills. So that's what we want to do. We want to overall catch that up, and create connectivity.
Okay,
And that's how we have a lasting change. It's a lasting change.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I think that explains that then. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you have any more slides? Yeah,
I do. So I thought we would talk a little bit about anxiety. And this is a handout I have. So for any of your listeners that would like to have this handout, I can email it to them or send it to you. And this is just some helpful tips and strategies for dealing with anxiety. And anxiety is, I would say, in the past, post-COVID world that we're in, we've always had a lot of anxiety cases, but this is off the charts. And kids as young as 5 years old are struggling with panic attacks, anxiety, and I think everybody can relate to that right now. So what I wanted to do was just show some techniques and trips, and give you some tips of things you can do as a lifestyle change, to help ease anxiety. Because basically what's happening is you've got some subconscious areas of the brain that are basically sending emergency signals out to you. So you need to calm certain areas of the brain. So what we want to do, and this is also when we were talking about the left and the right brain, there's certain smells or certain colors or certain sides of the body we work on. Everything is very hemispheric specific, but we're going to focus right now on the right side of the brain, because typically that is where a lot of anxiety lies. So we're going to focus, and I have my coach here with us, one of my coaches. Her name is Jessica. Hello. She's our lead coach here at the Roswell location, and she's been with us for many years.
Hi, Jessica. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you. So she is going to, let me see if I got that right on you. Okay. She's going to give us an example of an exercise we do to get us out of that fight or flight mode. And this is called the starfish. So it's all about breathing, and it's activating certain areas in the very downstairs part of the brainstem. Okay. So she's sitting on the very edge of a chair, and she's doing specific breathing in and out, and she's alternating her hands, and she's crossing her leg. So she's counting in her head, and then she's switching sides. And this again is called the starfish. Now, what we would also do to calm anxiety, low lighting is always great. Probably can't tell. In my office, We always have fluorescent light covers and low light lamp so that we can help calm certain areas. Now, there's some other things that I would do with her. I would put on certain smells, even on a certain side of her body to hit that hemisphere of the brain. So for instance, on the right side of her body for smell, olfactory, I would give her smells like peppermint or garlic or clove. The stronger smells are the right brain smells. So pine tree, that's my favorite, pine tree, I think, because it smells like a Christmas tree. But giving a right brain smell, doing the deep breathing, doing an exercise like the starfish, again, that's activating certain areas of that brain, that subconscious part of the brain that's giving you these emergency signals. And just basically redirecting your brain to calm down that vestibular system that's overacting, because as we all know, it gets very physical. And doing positive affirmations are wonderful. There's so many things that we can do. That is just one exercise, but smells are very powerful. We don't realize how powerful they are. I don't know. I'm sure probably everyone has had COVID by now. I don't know. But if you lost your sense of smell during that time, you can see how powerful and how that impacts your eating. As a matter of fact, we have a lot of kids with hyper or hypo sense of smell, and they're picky eaters. Smell connects us to memory. It ties us to emotions. So when we're needing to activate that sense of smell, if it's not 100%, we're doing smell memory. So smells are a big part, of our senses and how our brain develops. So it's very powerful. Even a smell, it can help you focus. It can help you relax. So just think about all of your senses and doing something to all of them to calm that down.
How would you use, and maybe, let's see, are we finished with this before we go into that? Are we finished with this slide? Maybe we can just stop sharing and just for a minute. We can always come back up. Put it back.
That's fine. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll stop the share.
Okay, great. How would you put that smell into play though, right? So I assume it's an essential oil maybe that you would utilize. And what would you do? So if it's on, if you're talking about putting it on a specific side, how would you do that? Is it on the side of the face? Is it on the body? Like what are some specific application areas you would use?
So what we would do is put it right here, probably at your shoulder area of your shirt.
Okay.
They're pretty strong. Yes, they are essential oils. So right here is usually where we apply it. We have a spray bottle, and I know a lot of essential oil, you can even get them off Amazon to spray them out, but there's rollers as well. So if I was going to roll it on, I'd probably just roll it on my neck here. So this smell is same-sided. So it's actually the only thing, because olfactory, it's immediate. So it is the same side that you're working on. So everything else is the opposite side. So if I was doing something, to stimulate, say, and here's another tactile stimulation is really, really to calm down anxiety. You want the sensory input. So I would just, take my arm or the arm of someone and just start doing deep massage or deep rubbing their hands. And also taking your shoes off and going outside in nature and grounding yourself. That's a really great way to help calm yourself. And it's a great practice to do all the time. And people might see you out there and it might be a little chilly or whatever, and you think you're odd, but you know what? I do it when I can. I'll go in the back on my lunch break and I'll walk around in the grass just to ground myself. And it works, because there's all these millions of receptors in the bottom of your sole of your feet. And there's so many things in there that help ground you, especially when you're walking on grass. So if you think about, I don't know, when I was a kid, I used to be outside all the time. My mom would have to call me in for dinner. I'd be just playing in the dirt. And that's how our brain thrives in an environment where you're outside, and you can have that natural development. So things that hinder that would be, can you guess, Sherry? Screen time.
Yeah. Oh, guess. Yeah. Yes. Well, and
mom.
it focuses your view too, right? So Andrew Huberman talks a lot about that, how that focuses your view and it creates anxiety because of the closed in view, and you need to step out and get into an environment like outdoors so that your view widens, which has a calming effect overall.
Yep. Yes. And also when we have a child that it doesn't matter if you're left or right brain weak, what that's doing, let's just say video games. What that's doing is sending a little ping, a negative stimulation to the left side of the brain. So let's just say you're a child that has that really high IQ and you are playing video games for 8 hours a day. You're going to get addictive like behavior where it's going to be hard to pull you off that because you're getting that instant gratification seeking side of the brain on the left side. You're getting that filled constantly. And that's why you see when you say to your child, all right, time to come off. No, and then you can actually see when you start to see physical changes in their body where you can tell they really, it can't come off. That's where you have an issue and you should start limiting screen time. Everyone should limit it. We recommend an hour and no before bed to calm you down, especially if your child has, or, yourself, just 2 hours before bedtime, take away screens.
Yeah, I think that, back to kind of the focal view, neuroplasticity can be positive or negative, right? So if you're training your mind to be focused in on a screen, that's the way your brain becomes trained. And you have to put those programs into place. And I know that is, as you mentioned, a big issue for anxiety. Deana, we've talked a little bit about anxiety, and thank you for sharing those at-home tips to help do that. And maybe some more will come up during our conversation. But I want to kind of step back just a little bit and talk a little bit about brain balance in the big picture, right? Because you've put up that great slide that talks about which challenges really are sort of more centered in the different hemispheres of the brain. And so that slide, I think, is a good maybe representation, and maybe you can talk about it a little bit more of what kind of patients or challenges would be a good fit for brain balance overall. So if somebody's trying to decide if brain balance is right for their child, what do they need to look at? What do they need to evaluate? Is there, an age specific or a challenge specific or, other types of criteria that they should take into consideration?
That's a really great question, Sherry. So for a child to be a good fit, that is something that we determine at the assessment. At the initial assessment, we don't want to turn anyone down. So unless a child has an extremely complex case, which over the phone, someone would, we get basic information over the phone. So if there's some kind of diagnosis that has, and I don't even want to name any because there isn't one thing that we wouldn't try, but I can say this, we're working with the neuroplasticity, right? So anything physical that can't be changed, that's something obviously no one can change. But we've had children in the past that have come to us with complex issues, and they were coming in maybe for focus, and they have seen changes. And that could be a different conversation. But the typical child that we take would be a child that is struggling to sit still. I mean, that is, I would say, the biggest one, focused attention, emotional dysregulation, where their behaviors, and what I always tell the families and what we're looking for the root causes, and I'm giving them answers. We're giving them the why. Why are you seeing this? Because if you get a diagnosis of ADHD, the doctor typically doesn't tell you why. Why do you have this? You're just checking off enough symptoms to have your child qualify under that label. So we're telling you why, because there are underlying issues. So things like ADHD, just think of anything emotional, social, behavioral, or academic. Kids with dyslexia, kids that, my daughter, she was behind in reading when she was younger, and I had her do the program, and she was in the program a very short amount of time. And she went up a significant amount of reading levels. And we see this all the time. We see kids go up, 5 to 8 reading levels in anywhere from I don't know, 3 to 7 months. That's just an estimate. The duration of the program, that also depends on how complex the case is. So at the assessment, we do an intake and you have a whole questionnaire to fill it out. There's a lot of questions, and that's what that's for, to determine if the child is a good fit. Because we won't take anyone that we don't think we can help. But at the same time, we don't want to turn anyone down because we feel every child we want them to help reach their full potential, whatever that may be.
Okay, and is that assessment both physical and pen to paper, or what does that assessment look like?
It's a great question too. It is not pen to paper, it is sensory motor. And we're looking at things like processing, right? Auditory, visual, multisensory. We're looking at all these areas, sensory systems that we were talking about before that have to do with how we're feeling and sensing our body, that deal with emotions, how we're processing emotions, how we're, are we dysregulated? Is our brain age, lower than our chronological age in certain areas? So we're looking at different sensory systems. We're looking at coordination, things like coordination. We just don't even think about. A coordinated body is a coordinated brain, crossing that midline. All of that, our visual perception, our visual processing. There is a cognitive piece of the program. And when I actually started as a cognitive coach here. So unfortunately, I love being a coach. I'm no longer in with children. I am more overseeing the Roswell and Suwannee locations, but there is a cognitive piece to the program as well. So we're doing cognitive function based off the hemispheric weakness. So we're doing this intense multisensory stimulation, and we're doing it again through all of our senses. So sensory, like I was saying, smells. There's certain music that's hemispheric. There's tactile stimulation. So as the kids are going through the program, they're getting all of their senses to that child specifically intensely stimulated, as well as working on sensory systems that are underdeveloped. Even things like our core strength matter. Our core sets up a baseline processing speed of our brain. So we're just looking for all these areas, in the downstairs part of the brain that are underdeveloped.
Yeah, that, so kind of back to sort of the challenges by hemisphere, right? And so I guess the premise behind what the program there is that by strengthening the weaker side of the brain, that hemisphere, you lift the entire brain function up, right? So you're improving the weakest link, if you will, right? But I know that I think when we spoke earlier, you were talking about sort of the foundation of the program was based on some data from functional MRIs. Is that correct? Yeah, you want to talk a little bit about that, and then the research that you've done with both Harvard and Cambridge to sort of validate the program?
So we use brain mapping for that as you're talking initially, but I would love to share,
Yeah, go ahead.
if it's okay with you, I would love to just share some highlights from that data. And then I also would love to share a specific child's case. I don't know if we have enough time.
Yeah, I think we do. We've got 20 minutes, so go
Okay.
for it.
All right, perfect. Let me just pull this up.
Let me just remind you while you're pulling that up, our participants, if you have any questions, please do go ahead and post them in in the chat.
All right, so I am going to, now right here talks about some strategies, but again, if anyone wants any of these, I can send them to you or give them out via email. So I'm just gonna go right to the Harvard.
Yeah, what I'll do is I can attach all of this and send it to the population.
Okay, perfect. Hopefully that is showing the full screen. Yes, it is. Okay.
Yeah, good job.
So we have a study with Harvard University and McLean Hospital that I think is very powerful. It was on children, and it's a 27-page report. You can find all these studies if you go to our website under the research tab. And you can, if you like that data, you can actually see brain imaging pre and post. And I really do want to just talk about this one because it's such a powerful study. So it was with Harvard University McLean Hospital, and I don't know how to get that. I don't want to move the slide.
What are you trying to do?
I just moved the slide. I want to go back. Okay. I was trying to just move
Yeah,
a little.
I think this is the one you want.
Okay. So this is based off of children with ADHD. And this is a 6-month time span that this was on. And they did brain imaging pre and post. So you can actually see the brain imaging on the fuller report, as I said, on our website, brainbalance.com, under research, if you want to look at all of that. But these are just some highlights. So if you look over here, what they've basically said is they've never seen, so this is looking for alternatives for children with ADHD. And they've never seen that degree of improvement unless a child was on optimal doses of medication. So they're showing that they're seeing the same results as if a child was on medication. So that, I think that's pretty powerful for families that are looking for non-medical. And not everyone in our center, we don't monitor if they're on or off medication. That's up to the family and the doctor, but just a lot of families that are looking for an alternate. So this is a quote from the head right here. He's the associate professor of psychiatry at Harvard University, and he's the lead investigator of the study. And Martin Teicher wrote, the brain balance training and had clinical, behavioral, and neurobiological effects on par with pharmacological treatment. This is very encouraging, as we believe the ultimate goal in psychiatry is to develop non-pharmacological treatments for psychiatric disorders that exert enduring behavioral beneficial effects. So basically, when you're looking at this overall, you can look at a child that is inattentive, can't sit still, and then you can look at the difference after a 6-month program. And I want to also put in there that the program that was done was our home program. So
I'm sorry, was what program?
It was our virtual home program.
Oh, it was. Okay. And if so, for a 6-month program, would that be, how frequently is that per week? If it's, is it once a week, couple times a week?
It's 3 times a week if it's in center.
Okay.
So it's an hour, 3 times a week. And there's some stuff to do at home on the off days if you're coming in center. Now, it's ideal to come in center, but sometimes it just doesn't work out because you're far, you have 2 working parents, and it's just not possible, or there's a lot of challenges with that. So we do have now our whole virtual center. That program is done anywhere from, it takes about 30 to 50 minutes, 5 to 6 days a week.
Okay.
And that's at your leisure at home.
And has that been shown as effective as the in-person?
Yep. Yes, absolutely. That's, as I said, the Harvard study was on the home program.
Oh, that's right. That's right. You did mention that.
Yes. Yes. And this is Cambridge Science. So it's showing you some cognitive gains for students with attention and developmental challenges. And that also is on our website, and it's pretty powerful as well. If you,
what were the developmental challenges in this study?
This really focuses more on the executive function of the brain. So things like working memory, spatial span, different areas of the brain that the cognition. So right here, memory, reasoning, verbal ability, concentration. So it's a lot of areas, but it's more of a cognitive level. And that's with Cambridge Science.
And that was for a 3-month program? Okay.
And then this one is the Journal of Health and Clinical Psychology. And I just highlighted this. The findings reveal that nearly all the children who participated in the program showed improvements in mental well-being. So most categories reached an average to 40 to 50% improvement, which I thought was pretty good.
Okay, and that was for children with anxiety, ADHD, and or autism.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
okay.
The study based off of, but that also breaks that down into specific behaviors and, there's ODD. We work with a lot of behavioral, emotional, whatever overstimulation and deregulation, or dysregulation is happening. We can work with that. So that's another study that I thought was really powerful. And this just gives you an idea over here, of some of the areas you had asked me about the assessment. And this is just, unpacking the program. It's showing you the journey. So the first step obviously is the assessment. And in the assessment, we're looking at, we're a multisensory hemispheric approach. We're a developmental approach. We're looking at primitive reflex integration, gross motor exercises, balance, body awareness development. We talked about that. We're also doing fine motor, vestibular stimulation, eye exercises, visual processing exercises, improved language, auditory stimulation, auditory processing exercises, rhythm and timing training, educational services, elimination diet, you had mentioned, behavioral support, and social skills development. So that's
Yeah,
just
sorry, Dina. Yeah, thank you for that. I think that really gives people a good overview of like what happens in the program and what you would assess specifically. Let's talk a little bit about the diet and nutrition component of brain balance, because I think that is different. That's another unique feature that you guys have, and not a lot of people integrate that in to the program. Is it just this elimination diet component here, or are there supplements and nutritional guides that you're sharing with your patients?
Sure. So with our program now that we use is called Balance 360, and you get appointments with a registered dietitian, and you talk about gut health, because our gut health is our second brain. So that's another box that needs to be checked, because it's never just one thing. And again, there could be something that's causing brain fog or something causing behavior issues and a food sensitivity. So we don't want to leave that out. So you talk and just have a conversation of what that looks like. And yes, there is an elimination diet that that they go over with you to basically eliminate and then reintroduce and track, to see if there's any significant changes. And then, yes, supplements, that's a big deal. Talk about supplements. And then we give you a lot of resources. You actually get access to a parent portal. And on that portal, there's recipes. And say you're shopping at Trader Joe's, it gives you recommended brands of food. And so we want to foster future development of the brain post-program. So that's a big deal for us, because this is a lasting change. This is meant to be a lasting change. My oldest child, I'm a brain balance mom as well, went through the program when he was 14, and it changed his life significantly. And he was diagnosed with ADHD, and now he's 24. And if you asked me back then if I thought he'd be driving a car even, I would have been in fight or flight myself, because the thought of that, it just was like, he can't focus. How is he going to drive a car? How is he going to be independent? These are life skills. And now he's living in another state. He lives in Colorado, and he is in culinary school, and he is living his best life. And I couldn't be happier. So this is meant to be a lasting change.
Yay, that's great. That's a pretty good story right there. But I know you have another one you wanted to share.
I did. I wanted to share some data actually to share. So let me.
Okay, while you're making that transition, we got a couple of questions that I think are probably relevant. One I think was, is this program beneficial for adults? Which is, I know the answer to that is yes. So I'll just go ahead and answer that one. I don't know. I'm sure they would go through the same assessment, Deana, that children would. It would be the same program.
So it depends on the age. So right now, each center around the country is taking different ages. We have an adult program in itself. And in our specific centers here in Atlanta, we have not started. We have a waiting list for our adult program, and we'll be rolling that out. We have our own virtual center. So about 10 centers combined, and we have this amazing virtual program that we have right now for children. And right now we're looking at children college age up to about 24. that
Okay.
come to our centers. So older than that, we're looking at a waiting list. Yeah, looking at a waiting list. But yes, this can be, we're working with the neuroplasticity. It allows for change at any age. So absolutely.
Okay, great. And then there were a few questions around the cost and insurance coverage for that.
Sure. So the cost of the program, it really does vary. And no, unfortunately, insurance usually doesn't cover it. And I don't want to say it never does, because I've seen families that have, wrote into their insurance companies and somehow got it covered. But we do take things like HSA, FSA. We used to do care credit, but overall, we don't have we're not medical. So we're not able to give a code out for insurance.
Okay.
This is more, it's a tuition-based program. So it's a tuition, and you're paying for a certain amount of time, as if you're going to, say, a private school, right? You pay for a semester. There's different ways to pay that. We do have a financing option if you need monthly payments. But there's also, discounts if you pay, say you put it in your credit card, you pay in full. But it depends on the child's assessment. So the minimum time here is 3 months. The average time is about 6 months. But we've had kids here, that can come up to a year or so. This is not meant to be years and years, though. This is meant to be, we track the data every session. You have a progress report every month. So you're always going to know how your child's leveling up. And we're going to know if the child's stagnant in a certain area. And then you get a post-assessment at the end. And then once you're complete, we still do check-ins post-program so that we can make sure things are good. And we do another assessment maybe 6 months to a year later. Again, just to make sure things are good.
Yeah, and but your program doesn't include sort of any fMRI, right? You're just using the data from those original studies. So there's a question around brain mapping, and I don't think that's it's not part of the program. I just want to clarify. That was just original work to develop the program. So I hope that answers your question, George. If that's not it, please do follow up on that in your chat there. And then, talking about, he had another question about teaching a child to ride a bike or driving. You're not teaching those skills specifically, right? Those are just.
We're working on the areas, right? So as that first slide, or one of the first slides we're looking at, it says we're creating a teachable brain. That's what that synchronization is. So if I was going to try to teach a child a skill that there's something like a roadblock standing in the way of, like, for instance, riding a bicycle, that requires hand-eye coordination, that requires balance. And when we look at all these, that's what we're working on in these underdeveloped areas. And we see children that, they have an overactive, say, equilibrium, and they're having trouble in time and space with depth perception and all of that. It's going to be hard for them to ride a bike. But as we get that, that intact, and we get these areas and we get them out of different infant pathways, even, because we're going back and looking at things that should have happened as early as in utero. So when we see these develop, that's when we have a conversation with the parent and say, the parent usually like, oh my gosh, he can ride a bike now. Like, these are our testimonials all the time. So as we see things happening at that downstairs part of the brain, that's when we know, okay, that's what we're creating, a teachable brain. Then we can teach these skills.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I think the last question before we go into your case study here is, do you have any centers overseas? Are they just in the US or?
Yeah, unfortunately, right now they're just in the US, but we do have a lot of cases. I mean, we have had families from Russia, Saudi Arabia, Spain, Egypt. I know I'm leaving countries out, everywhere, Japan, because we give you the equipment. So the virtual program that we have is basically a director, a very tenured director, because everyone in our virtual center has been, I would say, at least 10 years in the program. So you're getting a director overseeing you and meeting with you weekly virtually and basically training you to implement this. And we give you access to our different programs and we mail the equipment to you. So we do have a lot of overseas families. I think I see the question, how much will the virtual program cost? The virtual program, let's just give an example of a 24-week, which is a 6-month program. That's an average, right? That program runs around $7,500. If you're financing it, if you're paying it in full, it runs $7,200. So again, there's ways that you can do that. If you're financing it, we have a financing company we use where you can pay it off over a year of no interest, or you can just look at other options with interest and pay it off over a longer period of time. So yes, that's the tuition average for the virtual program. Now the
Okay,
tuition, yeah, in center it ranges. It's a very broad range.
okay, thanks, Deana. Well, we've got about 2 minutes left. I want to give you a chance just to do a high level overview of your case study, because that always sort of speaks volumes. If you want to go ahead and do that, and then we'll close her out.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so this is one of our biggest visuals that we like to use, is the iceberg analogy, right? And I'm just going to close with this too. With the data, you can see it's going to be on this iceberg analogy because it's just a powerful view of, and it really does show you visible symptoms are up here. It's at the tip. And what we're working on is the 90% under the surface. So this is a child who came to us, and he's 14, 8th grade. We obviously took the name off, so we, for confidentiality. But what we look at here, this is a copy of a post assessment. So what you're seeing is some percentages and some age-based assessments. So the very bottom, primitive reflexes, it's showing you what reflexes were presented. So when we look at these infantile primitive reflexes, they should have already integrated by the time we're a year. So we initially test for these and see if some of them are presenting. And basically what that's doing is keeping us operating out of infant pathways. So we want to get these integrated. We want to get the brain to release these. So anyway, this is the end of this child's program. This child came in the program with anxiety, social issues, being bullied at school, focus and attention, could not sit still, and grades were also being affected by this as well. So when we looked at this and we developed this program for this specific child, this is showing you the post results. This child completed at the very top corner, it tells you the recommended sessions. So that's what will give you a broad range. So this child completed 72 sessions, which is about a 6-month program. But his recommended hours was a minimum of a 5-month program, all the way up to 96 sessions. So the primitive reflexes that have the checks were the ones that were initially presenting that have integrated. So there's no more reflexes presenting. That's great. That brings us up to a higher level of stability. And then we look at different areas of body awareness. And as we were talking about before, I'm going to go right up here to the right where it says body awareness. This is an age-based assessment. Child is 8 years old, came in here, tested out with body awareness of an age 4. So the parents really, that resonated with them because they were seeing behaviors and meltdowns that were, and even social interactions that were more of on that 4-year-old level. And so when the child graduated, they were at age 8. Coordination, this child went way above and beyond, but started out already at 11 and then ended at 19. So you can see where it's showing you where it started and where it ended. And as far as this case goes, the equilibrium, we're at 87%. We went from 40%, which is really, and this child was hypo, meaning they weren't feeling their body enough. So they were constantly seeking to feel their body. And that's where we see children that just can't sit still because it feels good to move. that's how we feel our body. We're moving to pay attention. So significant increase in focus, attention. Child gains the ability to get that, read a room when walking into a room, friendships, life skills, and also grades went up as well. And then we look up here at processing. These are specific eye movements. And this child came in here with his visual focus at 7%. And that is basically the ability to hold your gaze and perceive objects around us. Went to 100% from that. And then eye tracking, you see that 67%. So this is overwhelmingly fatiguing. And then we look at multisensory processing. That was age 14, went up to a 19. So we still have areas of improvement here, obviously, right? I mean, body awareness is at an 8-year-old, but we took it up 4 years. Now the child's recommended sessions were up to 96. So with this specific case, this is what I was saying, we still continue to monitor. So this child's going to be coming in post-program, and this child is still going to be getting tested or getting a check-in every month. And then the program director is going to monitor that. And then this specific family is most likely going to be coming back for maybe another couple of months. But we're going to see, because we're going to still give them some things to do at home to work on some areas that we're still behind in, like body awareness, like equilibrium. But we've got some really good gains. But looking at the auditory processing, it started at age 7, went up to age 9. Again, there's definitely still room for improvement. But this is where we see some real, I mean, multisensory processing was already at age 14. Now it's at age 19. So,
Deana, oh, sorry. Well, I was going to ask in relation to that, like on the auditory processing, et cetera, those areas. Is that a point where maybe you would bring in somebody who is just focused on auditory processing as a partner, or do you still have the program that can address those?
The program can. Okay. There's different programs for each of these things. So for instance, they would get some more, the program will be tailored to that child specifically. And as they progress, we can change that. So obviously when we level up and we hit our goals on certain areas, then we're going to be focusing more on the other areas. So their program's going to progress as they come through. But this child, the parents are elated. They are just very happy with everything they've seen. And, again, there's still some room for improvement, but taking a child, I mean, you can see that's 4 years of development. That's in a 6-month amount of time.
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty powerful. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Deana. I think that's real impressive. And the fact that you've got all that in-house, I think is, it's kind of a one-stop shop there, which is very nice to be able to do that because, if you look at your psych evaluation, like children, if they go through down that process and get that psych eval, it highlights all those different points that you might want to address, but then, they'll often send you off to individual providers for the auditory, for the visual, for the speech, and, PT, whatever else those issues are. And it's amazing to me how much the primitive reflex is at play in all of these cases, and that you don't notice that as a parent. I mean, I have a 16-year-old, well, he's 17 now. And, trying to get to the root of some of the challenges that he has. And they were visual challenges, but they ended up being the root of that was some of those primitive reflex challenges, which just, as much as I'm into this, that blew my mind. And, because you go to the pediatrician, they check these things off, right? But it's a much more cursory level. So that I think that's one of the things that really needs to be addressed. That's just so basic of an element that just never gets identified, even though your pediatrician is checking that, and testing for it. Yeah, it's crazy. We had one last question here, I think, that is around insurance codes, again, kind of going back to that. Do you guys provide the codes for individuals to then file with insurance, or No.
No, we don't. That's what I'm saying. We're non-medical. We're
Yeah.
actually the umbrella of an achievement center. So this is more of a holistic approach. It's a non-medical approach. So we don't have a medical code.
Okay.
Now, with that being said, there's certain insurance that covers a broader array of things. And I've had families that have needed, us to write them a letter or do something, and we explain exactly what we're doing. And I've seen them get reimbursed for parts of it. But typically, this is a tuition-based program. So it's tuition you're paying, and, most of the time, insurance, unless it's, a health savings plan or FSA, we're not gonna, you can't come in with your insurance card and give it to us.
Yeah, and I think that most people sort of understand that. I think the question was more along the lines like, speech therapy, it will often have a code, even though it's integrated into some of these neuroplastic based therapies, and you can often get
Right.
a code for that component and then charge it. But I understand. Last question here, or another question is, does it help in post recovery of encephalitis? That's specific.
Encephalitis.
Encephalitis, yeah, like brain swelling and
Yeah, I mean, that's again, it's complex. I don't want to say that, yeah, brain inflammation. Yeah, okay. I don't like to say that there's a limit on anything. It depends on why. I mean, how there's so many different factors. I would really say, if you are looking into this, whether you're an adult or it's for a child, to call your local center and ask to have an assessment, because at that assessment in the intake, they'll let you know if it's a good fit or not. And there's just so many other things that go to play with all of these. So I don't want to say that this is a cure for anything. It's improving underdeveloped areas of the brain, and everybody's cases are so specific and so different. Neurologists would be needed first.
Yeah, I know. We had one of our partners is Marla Golden, who treats chronic pain and several other things. She had encephalitis, and her mother basically designed a neuroplastic program for her to help recover from encephalitis. I know it's very specific, but there are examples where it has these types of programs have helped after encephalitis. But like you said, Deana, you'd have to be evaluated.
Right. Yes. It's not that easy. Even a child that for ADHD, that's the typical child I'd say that we take, there could be something else that's going on that in the intake would put a red flag up. And that's usually not the case, but that's what I'm saying. That's why it's important to have this intake and have the conversation with the director at your local center, and just go over everything about your child specifically, because we want to make sure your child reaches full potential.
And I know we're running over, but this is one last question, and I wanted to address this as well. So I'm going to throw it in, and then I think we're going to have to sign off. But the training or certifications for the coaches, and which is because you have so many centers, and you guys treat such a wide range of challenges. I know that that's a real important aspect of what makes Brain Balance successful. So why don't you address that just real quick?
Sure. So obviously there's not one specific, if you go to school to be a lawyer, that's, you're getting your degree in certain areas. There's certain areas that we look at to hire our coaches. I would say the most common is exercise science, kinesiology. We've had PTs, we've had OTs. Now they're not coming in here to practice that though. They're just in certain, because as you said, Sherry, there's so many different areas being covered. Even educators, it just depends on their background. And it really is specific to that person understanding the brain balance model. So exercise science, I would say, is the most popular, but again, we've had PTs, OTs, psychology has also been a good one. but we certify, and there's a very complex training. A coach is not alone with a child for a very long period of time. We have our own, we used to have a university, we call Brain Balance University, but we have a very complex training system. For my training, I went to New York and basically did this program for weeks upon weeks until I literally threw up doing it. And this was a lot. I'm with the company now, just going on about 10 years. So that was a long time ago, but there is very complex training. So our coaches are all certified in our training, which is very specific because it's again, a very precise protocol that these coaches are following. It's not up for interpretation. It's a protocol.
Okay, great. Deana, thank you so much. If somebody wants to get in touch with Brain Balance, I know you guys have a website, and is there any other information that you want to put out there?
Sure. I also wanted to offer $100 off, and this is for Atlanta. I'm sorry, I can't do that nationwide. But if you are around any of our centers in the Atlanta area, our assessment, if you watch this and just mention and call the local center that you watch this lunch and learn, that you get $100 off the assessment. So
Thank you.
Sure. And then my email, let me just, okay, screen share this again. This is my email, and this is our phone number. So I would love to share, with anyone, any tips, especially the anxiety guidebook that I had put up earlier that we give out, just telling you some really great things to put into your morning routine and your bedtime routine. Very simple things, but it's a lifestyle. So this is our phone number right here, 770-650-8010. That's actually the Roswell location. Again, we have 3 locations in Georgia: Roswell, Suwanee, and Peachtree City. And
what's the Brain Balance website? Just the general?
It's brainbalance.com or
Okay.
brainbalancecenters.com. Either one, it'll take you there. If you just Google Brain Balance Roswell or wherever you're at, Brain Balance, it'll come up. But it's brainbalance.com.
Yeah, that is easy to find. You can just simply share it or Google it, like you said. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's going to be it for today. Deana, thank you so much for joining. We appreciate you taking the time to explain brain balance. And that's a little bit of a tongue twister there if you're going fast.
It can be. All of these things can be
maybe I need
over and over again, right?
Yeah, maybe I need to go through the program a little bit myself. All right, everyone, back to work. Thank you for sharing your lunch with us, and we'll see you tomorrow for Lunch and Learn as well. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Sherry.
Thank you.